How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I'm your host, Kenneth Gruenfelder, and today we're going to be covering the NFL. It's been a while. We've been talking about the Knicks and the Yankees so much, but one of the things that we are going to cover very heavily on this channel is the NFL. Now, of course, it is the off season, but there are things that have happened over the course of the last several weeks that I wanted to cover. I know we did a Shedeur Sanders video when the draft first happened, where he ended up falling. Of course, we touched upon the Giants a little bit in their draft and their schedule as well. But there were some other things that I wanted to cover as well, and we're going to do that in this episode today. Just a few things. So the first thing I wanted to cover is we did lose Jim Irsay. Jim Irsay, of course, was the owner of the Indianapolis Colts. He took over as the owner in 1997. His father bought the team, I think it was, 1972. And Irsay was with the organization. He actually was working as the GM, but then when his father passed away, he took over, and he was the youngest owner at the time. And he passed away not too long ago, and I wanted to talk about that because he put the Colts back on the map. Before he got there, the Colts, they really, weren't much. And, once he drafted Peyton Manning, once he was part of that regime that brought Peyton Manning in, that changed everything. And he will be remembered as an icon all throughout Indianapolis. And I saw a little bit of Reggie Wayne when he addressed it. There were many players that came out with statements on social media, and I saw Reggie Wayne, the video of him. He was very emotional over it. Jim Irsay had a very close relationship with a lot of the players. Pat McAfee put stuff out. Peyton Manning put stuff out. And, when Peyton Manning came to the organization, like I said, that changed everything. The Colts, they were a playoff team pretty much every year with Peyton Manning. Rookie year, of course, there were some growing pains. The Colts weren't very good, but Peyton Manning turned into one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. They won the Super Bowl in 2006 against the Bears, and it was a tough call when they had to release Peyton Manning. It wasn't an easy decision because Peyton Manning, of course, missed the entire 2011 season, the neck surgeries, didn't know if he was going to be able to play again. If he was going to play, was he going to be the same player? And it really was a tough call. And Jim Irsay did make the tough decision to let him go and reset the franchise and bring in Andrew Luck. They drafted him in 2012. And, Peyton Manning kind of distanced himself from the Colts. Wasn't really close with the organization. When we see Peyton Manning, a lot of times he's in Denver. He's doing stuff with the Broncos, not really with the Colts. Because, he felt... I guess, there was some bitterness, because, I think he knew he could still play. And obviously what he did in Denver, those first few years. And then, of course, they did win the Super Bowl. But that was, when Peyton was towards the end and, really didn't have it. But he felt like he could still play. And he just, I think there was some bitterness there. But, of course, that's been mended. And, of course, in the statement that he released, he had nothing but great things to say about Jim Irsay and what he meant to him, giving him his shot in the NFL and the career that he ended up having. And like I said, a ton of players, they put out a bunch of statements. T.Y. Hilton, I already mentioned Reggie Wayne, Pat McAfee, and the list goes on and on. And Jim Irsay, he had his flaws. But he's going to be remembered for turning this organization around. And, my heart goes out to his family. His family is going to take over the ownership for the Colts. So I wanted to bring that up, wanted to bring that to attention. He passed away at the age of 65, and he dealt with a lot of health issues over the course of the last several years. And, so that he was an icon, and he will be missed. So now let's kind of switch into the other topics that I wanted to get into. And there's no easy way to kind of transition, from a topic like that into another, but that's what we're going to do here. So I wanted to get into the George Pickens trade. So George Pickens traded from the Pittsburgh Steelers to the Dallas Cowboys. So the Cowboys get George Pickens and a 2027 sixth-round pick in exchange for a 2026 third-round pick and a 2027 fifth-round pick. I actually really do like this move for the Cowboys. You know, we were talking about the Cowboys a lot, even going back to GSMC. They needed another weapon outside of CeeDee Lamb. You know, since they let go, and well, not really let go, but they traded Amari Cooper to the Browns, you know, and Brandon Cooks was getting older. They really needed that second wide receiver. And CeeDee Lamb last year had 1,194 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. He had 101 receptions. The other wide receivers on the team, so I didn't include running backs, I didn't include the tight ends in these stats, but the other wide receivers on the team had 133 receptions, 1,614 receiving yards, and 13 touchdowns. Their second leading receiver was Jalen Tolbert. He had 7 touchdowns, 49 receptions, and 610 yards. Now, the other thing, too, is Dak Prescott got hurt. And you had Cooper Rush playing the majority of the games down the stretch. Trey Lance saw some playing time as well. It was a down year for the Cowboys, but they needed another playmaker to this offense. They didn't run the ball that well either. They did address the running back position in the offseason between free agency and the draft. They signed a couple of running backs. They drafted a running back. But what I was saying is with this draft, they should have taken a receiver, and they didn't do that. They ended up addressing the offensive line because Zach Martin ended up retiring. And, you know, the Cowboys actually ended up putting together a solid draft. And I think, you know, with the solid draft combined with Dak Prescott coming back healthy, you bring in George Pickens, the Cowboys are going to be a better team. I think they're going to be better than 7-10 this upcoming season, although the division is still going to be tough because you have the Commanders and the Eagles who both made it to the championship game, and the Eagles made it to the Super Bowl and won it. So it's going to be tough. This division is tougher than it has been in years past for the Cowboys because now you add the Commanders in. And, you know, the Giants are going to be an improved team, but I still think you're going to rank them last. So, look, I like the move, adding Pickens. I think, you know, different skill set than CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb is, of course, one of the best receivers in the league. George Pickens is a pretty good wide receiver himself, but CeeDee Lamb could do more things as a receiver. With George Pickens, this is the deep ball guy. This is the guy that's going to stretch the field, and, you know, it adds another threat to this offense. And like I said, this is something that the Cowboys really needed going into next year. And the wide receivers in this division, it's loaded because now you have Pickens along with CeeDee Lamb, you have A.J. Brown with Devontae Smith, you have Terry McLaurin with Deebo Samuel, and then, of course, you have Malik Neighbors with the Giants. There's a lot of wide receiver talent in this division. But for me, yeah, and they have no plans on extending Pickens. I like the move. They have no plans to extend Pickens. They're going to let this final year of his rookie deal play out, see how he does, and if he plays really well, then the Cowboys potentially bring him back. If not, then they let him go and they try to reload at that position, whether it's through the draft or free agency. But there was a lot of stuff coming out of Pittsburgh that he supposedly forced himself out. He posted something on Twitter saying that the Steelers were a cheap organization, but he took that down. You also were hearing that Mike Tomlin was a prominent figure in getting Pickens out of Pittsburgh, which it doesn't really surprise me because Pickens, you know, is kind of a head case. And the Steelers have dealt with plenty of head cases at the wide receiver position over the years, including Antonio Brown, to name at least one receiver. You know, he had Chase Claypool as well being another one, Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, Juju wasn't as bad as Antonio Brown or George Pickens. He just, you know, was a TikTok star. You know, not to, you know, knock Juju but it's true. You know, there was the dancing on the Cowboys logo on TikTok. It wasn't a good look. But yeah, the Steelers have had to deal with a lot of wide receiver issues off the field, and George Pickens was the latest of that. And, you know, the Cowboys have dealt with a lot of strong personalities themselves in their locker room, so this is going to be no different. And, you know, you do have a leader in Dak Prescott over there. So I think Pickens, it'll work out. It's gonna work out. But if it doesn't, hey, he's just there for 1 year, and they can let him walk after the season. But yeah, no, I mean, this is what the Cowboys were looking to do. Jerry Jones was talking about, being involved in trade talks and trying to get something done. And all you were hearing throughout the draft, and leading up to the draft and throughout the draft, is George Pickens going to get traded, because the Steelers went and they got DK Metcalf, and many people talking about DK Metcalf and George Pickens having the same skill set. So now DK Metcalf, he's brought in, he gets paid, that 5-year extension, and Pickens is out. And the Steelers, are kind of thin at that receiver position. They did bring back, or they brought in Robert Woods. You have Roman Wilson, who you drafted out of Michigan. You're hoping that he has a better year too. You have Calvin Austin, who showed you something last year. But yeah, the Steelers, they need help there at that position. But for the Cowboys, though, I think this was a move that needed to be made. And this offense should return to a better place in 2025. And they get things started. We'll actually bring this up. So the Cowboys will open up the season in Philadelphia against the Eagles. That's the first game of the year. That'll get us started off. I don't believe I brought that up in my Giants video. I think this was after the fact. But that'll be the first game of the year. And, that should be a good game. That's a good game to get us started off. And then you have the Chargers and the Chiefs the following night. So, yeah, that's how week 1 is shaping out. But, that's quite the way to start off the season, Cowboys against the Eagles. You kind of had a feeling that was going to be it. Maybe the Lions and the Eagles. But that's what we got. So, George Pickens traded to the Cowboys. We will see how it all plays out. But you definitely expect there to be more production now, with the receivers opposite of CeeDee Lamb. That's what they needed. So I really like that move. But actually, I did bring up the Lions briefly. So they did lose a huge piece of their offense, and it's on the offensive line. So Frank Ragnow announced his retirement at the age of 29, dealing with health issues of his own. And he felt like the best thing for him is to take a step away from the game and focus on himself, his health, and his family. So that's a big loss on the offensive line for the Lions. And, they continue to lose guys. They lost both coordinators in Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. You lose a key piece on the offensive line. So, people are starting to say, did the championship window close for the Lions already? I don't think we should say that. Let's see what they look like during the year, but I'm not ready to say that their championship window has closed just yet. Let's see how 2025 plays out. But that's a huge loss on the offensive line, because that offensive line was one of the best in the league. And Jared Goff is a much better quarterback when he's protected. Every quarterback is better when they're protected. But, Jared Goff is not someone that uses their legs often. He's not super mobile. He's not a Lamar Jackson. He needs protection. He's more of that traditional pocket passer. We've seen what Jared Goff looks like under pressure. So, and that this is something that happened after the draft. The Lions are going to try to figure it out. Right now that they are a smart organization. The way they've kind of changed the culture and built things up. But, that's not going to be easy to replace. So we'll see what ends up happening there, but I wanted to bring that up as well. But now let's get into the other big topic, the final topic that we'll cover today, and that is the 49ers and Brock Purdy. So Brock Purdy got paid, got his new deal. His new deal was for 5 years, $265 million, which is fifth in total value, $181 million guaranteed. His annual AAV is $53 million, which is seventh in the NFL. Signing bonus is $40 million. This contract runs through 2030. And the salary cap hits 2025. It's going to be very low. It's $9.1 million. But then it increases as we move along. And 2026 is $24.7 million. $30.8 million in 2027. Oh wait, 2026 is 24.7 million. 2028 is 57.6 million. 72.5 million in 2029, and then 2030 it's 64.6 million. So the 49ers have kind of backloaded the contract a little bit. Now, how do I feel about this? Brock Purdy deserved to get paid. He's not the highest paid quarterback in NFL history. He's not the highest paid player in the NFL currently. There's nothing like that. I think this was good for the Niners, and right now they have a window here. They still have the window. People are saying that the window's closed. We talked about the Lions just now with their window, but the 49ers are another team. Did their window close? I don't think so. I think they still have a window. I think they're a team that could definitely bounce back. They do have a relatively easy schedule going into the year. So I think the 49ers can be a team that very much improves from 2024 when they finished 6-11. And they have the last place schedule. They're going to be facing all the teams that finish in last place in the NFC. But for Purdy, look, he's not coming off of his best season. He was good at times during the year. He was injured a little bit. He missed some time. Actually didn't play in the final game of the regular season either. But look, the 49ers dealt with a lot last year between injuries and, some off the field stuff as well with some of the players. There was a lot. But Brock Purdy came in, and I said this back when I was doing GSMC as well. I feel like he has operated this offense in the Kyle Shanahan era better than any quarterback that Shanahan has had since he has become the head coach of the Niners. And that's Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance and C.J. Beathard and Nick Mullins, all these guys. Brock Purdy brought this team to an NFC Championship game. He brought them to a Super Bowl. Now, Garoppolo did the same thing as well. The 49ers were still good enough to win with Garoppolo back in 2019. They fell a little bit short. And they were good enough to win in 2023, and they fell short to the Chiefs in overtime. And I thought Purdy played well enough that the 49ers should have won. And for me, Brock Purdy is a quarterback that kind of falls in the middle. I don't think he's a game manager, but I don't think he's an elite quarterback. I think he's solid. He puts up good numbers. I think he takes care of the football for the most part. And the 49ers still have players around him. They paid Juwan Jennings. You got George Kittle there still. Christian McCaffrey, you hope, comes back and is healthy. Let's see how Ricky Pearsall is in year 2. Brandon Ayuk is going to be coming off of the torn ACL. There's still guys there. You still have Trent Williams on the offensive line. There are still guys on this team, from their Super Bowl runs, their championship runs. And, the defense, they lost a lot of guys. Charvarius Ward, they lost Ufanga, they lost Dre Greenlaw. But I feel like they could replace those guys. I feel like the defense can still be solid. They did address the defense in the draft. You still got Nick Bosa there. You still got Fred Warner there. There's still guys on this team. But now Purdy is going to have to live up to this contract. The expectations are going to be higher for Brock Purdy now that he has gotten paid. Many people are going to look at Brock Purdy being paid as a sign of, like I said, the 49ers championship window could be coming to a close because they don't believe that he could be the guy for this franchise. I think he can. Look at what he was. He was the last pick in the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. And he got a shot when Trey Lance got hurt, Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt. This team went to the championship game against the Eagles, and I feel like if he doesn't get hurt, we're going to see a much different game than what we ended up seeing. You're not seeing 31-7. It would have been a much closer game. And then the team got to the Super Bowl the following year. The 49ers' path has been similar in ways with their recent Super Bowl appearances, where they make it to the Super Bowl and then they just don't make the playoffs because they dealt with a lot of injuries. So if their squad could stay healthy, this is a playoff team. Now, you have to deal with the Eagles. You have to deal with the Rams. You have to deal with the Commanders. You have to deal with, I'm trying to think of, everybody in the NFC North, basically. The Packers, the Lions, the Vikings. There's a ton of good teams in the NFC. But that doesn't mean that the 49ers can't get themselves back to where they once were, and that's, one of the top 3 teams in the conference. So, yeah, it was a tough year, but if McCaffrey could stay healthy, that changes a lot of things. They're a much better team when he's on the field. If the defense can improve, because there were a lot of games last year that they lost a lot of close games last year. The defense kind of broke down at times, with injuries and just, the secondary had some holes in it. So, yeah, if they flip a lot of those one-score games around, that changes their season. But look, I'm fine with the Purdy contract. I was nervous that it was going to be, north of $60 million, which I don't think Brock Purdy deserves to be paid $60 million. I mean, you look at the highest paid quarterbacks, some of them, you say they don't deserve to be paid that much money. Like you look at Trevor Lawrence's contract, he's really going to have to live it up this year. I mean, especially when they go out and they draft arguably the best player in the draft in Travis Hunter, and now you have him and Brian Thomas Jr., you better produce. Brock Purdy's got to do the same thing. He's got to produce. But at least for Brock Purdy, he's been to 2 NFC Championship games and a Super Bowl. Trevor Lawrence has 1 playoff win. And this is now his 5th season. And even Tua. Tua had a great 2023, but he still doesn't have a playoff win yet. And he's getting paid a lot of money. Brock Purdy at least has gone out there and he has played well. And he has gotten his team far in the playoffs, in the postseason. So I'm good with the contract. The 49ers, they can manipulate it as they move along. And Brock Purdy even said, look, we got to make room to make this team as best as possible. He doesn't want all the money. Because he could have got more. He could have asked for more. And he plays the most important position on a football team. And you got to respect that, because some of these quarterbacks, they'll take the most money. Why was Tom Brady so successful? Because he would take pay cuts and he want to keep his guys because he wants to win. That's what I wish a lot of these other quarterbacks would do, is they manipulate their contracts so, you're able to keep a lot of guys. We see Patrick Mahomes has done that. The Chiefs has done that. That's why the Chiefs keep making it to the Super Bowl and the championship games every year. It's part of the reason. So we'll see what happens. But Brock Purdy deserved to get paid. I'm fine with the contract. I like the George Pickens trade as well. I've said that over and over again on this episode. So, let me know what you guys think, though, about what we talked about. We're going to try to get to the NFL as much as possible, because now with the Knicks being done, and we will talk about the Knicks this week, I promise. We didn't get to them today, but we will get to them, because there was more news that dropped recently that I want to get into with Ben. We're going to try to record tomorrow, because there's a coaching change with the Knicks. So we will get into that. Also with the Yankees, we will recap tonight's game tomorrow. First game of a 3-game set with the Cleveland Guardians. They get Jazz Chisholm back, but they lose their closer, Luke Weaver. He's going to be out at least 4 to 6 weeks. So we will get into all that tomorrow. But look out for more videos coming out. Make sure to check out all the other videos as well on the channel. The recap of the Yankees-Dodgers series from this weekend. And I will talk to you guys next time. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciated. So until next time, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off. Have a good one, and I will talk to you guys next time.